Hey, there are some things that you may not know about the Bible. Um, Maybe your pastor hasn't told you those things about the Bible. That's what we're going to talk about in this blog series, which I've already done some of the outlining for you, and you can go back and look at the assertions made against people who really are responsible for teaching you the Bible. So we're going to delve into that. We're going to uncover some things and make you see how reliable the Scripture is or isn't. So here I am going live again and want to address some of the comments that were made about the authority of Scripture, which is really what I want to talk about today. And that's this right here. And this is a blog that's going to come out, and I will probably do it over just so I get out any of the bugs that I'm getting from doing it live. But it's something that I want to deal with. I believe it has to do with the authority of Scripture. And if just to remind you, I want to put this one up here, that I provide sound, reasonable, relevant answers that build your faith and witness. And I might add that they are biblically sound, they are logically reasonable, and that they are culturally relevant. I want to make that point for us all. And so here we go with this first assertion that I want to deal with. And I should mention that what I've done is rearrange the assertions. If you've read them or seen them on my YouTube channel, which is part of the blog playlist that's up there, I just wrote them and put them on the screen the way that they were given to me. But in looking at how to answer them, quite a few of them are ones you can put together. Now, let me just make this is a public service announcement. I haven't shut my other computer off, so it may ding sometime when someone comes in to give me a message, or you may hear a barking dog, who is Cosmo, my companion, who's usually with me, but he's locked away upstairs. Unfortunately, you can still hear him if he barks. So, sorry about that. So here we go. This fellow who, and I'm assuming it's a male, who wrote this to a friend of mine, he said, maybe wolves in sheep's clothing aren't people like me, but Christian leaders who have a whole lot of finances and power invested in you, accepting their theology at face value. Yeah. Don't buy it. They know this stuff. He said, most of them are fully or full aware of the facts I've mentioned above that undermine their theology. They've just chosen to leave it out of their Sunday sermons. Now, that's kind of a slam against pastors who I believe work hard at doing the work of ministry and getting things prepared. Some of them are seminary trained. They would have taken some courses that would have revealed a lot of the stuff that I'll address here. And I don't think that they're really afraid to do anything like that. I think that they know what they believe, and they believe that people believe the authority of Scripture. Now, in saying all of that, I fully endorse the idea of talking about how we got the Bible. As a matter of fact, after I returned to New Jersey from North Carolina, where I attended seminary, I taught a course here in the church on how we got the Bible. And I think we had about maybe 12 people come out at the time on a weeknight that I did this for 8 weeks, I believe it was, something like that. I still have the slides and the notes of that, and I've thought of revamping it and putting it together so that we could deal with this. So this fellow is saying that we have all these things that you don't know about the Bible. And one of the first ones that he deals with, he said, things you may not know about the Bible. And what are these things? He said, most of the books of Scripture are written anonymously, including all four of the Gospels, Acts, and Hebrews, in the New Testament and much of the Old Testament, with the exception of the prophets, some of the Psalms, and a few of the Proverbs. So, my question to him was, or is, first of all, what does that matter? What does it matter that we don't know where they came from? Now, the assertion is, and we'll deal with this in a later live video or a blog somewhere along the line, that I'll deal with the idea that we don't know, let me say it this way, that the Gospels don't have signatures on them written by or endorsed by those kinds of things. We don't really know why or when they started getting. At least that's what his assertion is. And what I'm going to do is use some cheat sheets and let you see what they are. Let me move some things around here on my screen and see it. This is from a book that I will recommend you get to read at some point, and I have to put it right in front of my face so that you can actually see it right. It's by Bill Mounce, and it's called Why I Trust the Bible. And William D. Mounce. It's an excellent book. I'll put a link on my YouTube channel for it, or even maybe here on this page to deal with it. It's probably one of the best books I've seen that really put everything together. There's another one that I would also highly recommend by Timothy Paul Jones, I believe. Why Should I Trust the Bible? Very good. We're looking at he has a course on this, how we got the Bible, that I think would be worth watching as well. And these give us some of the answers that you can really find to rebut any of these claims that may come out. So Bill Mounce says this. He says, it has long been said that the Gospels are anonymous. At one level, that's true. The names of the authors are not embedded in the text of the Gospels, but it is false to suggest that their names are not attached in other less direct ways. Now, maybe you don't like the fact that it's a less direct way. But one of the things that we believe about the Gospels is that before the end of the first century, it was already established who wrote which Gospels. And largely that comes through a man called Papias, who was a disciple of John from the Gospel of John, and interviewed elders and people traveling through an area. He was a bishop of Hierapolis, which is in modern-day Turkey, which was really a center for so much of Christianity. And we understand that other scholars have written on these things for quite a long time. Martin Hagel is one of them. He says that according to Mark, which is inscribed on the Gospel of Mark, was used much earlier than previously suspected. He says these titles were added sometime before the end of the first century. And they're pretty, you understand why he can get there once you look at the information that's provided there. And let me move off of this screen so you can see me full time there. There we go. Yeah, so what we understand about what Hengel has said is, and I think it's really good, the four Gospels were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, by the middle of the second century, were known for quite some time. So by the middle of the second century, that is the 100s, it's already come to our understanding that they know this. Now, if there had been multiple authors put on these Gospels, we would have found other manuscripts with different names on it. But throughout all of what we call textual criticism and even the discovery of these documents, We always find Matthew's name attached to Matthew's gospel, Mark's name attached to Mark's gospel, Luke's name and John's name attached to their gospels. Now, why is that important? Well, the early church exploded and went across what we call the Mediterranean basin, both north of it and south of it, for the first 100 years after the resurrection of Jesus. And these gospels are found all over. And you got to remember, they didn't have the kind of communication technology that we have today to let people know whose was what. But wherever you find these gospels, whether they are in Egypt, whether they are in Rome or Gaul, modern-day France, or Turkey, back then, which was called Asia or Asia Minor, you find the Gospel of Mark with Mark's name on it. You find the Gospel of John with John's name on it. Unlike the book of Hebrews, which is still up for questioning as to who the author is, where there are no names attached to it, and there are suggestions by different church fathers. Now, what does that matter? And we'll look at some of that as to how we got the canon in a later video. But for right now, we could easily establish that by the end of the 2nd century, that these were nailed down as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Papias does it at the end of the 1st century, follows all the way through, whether we look at the Muratonian canon, which was one of the first canons. Sorry for all these bings and dings. I didn't shut off my notifications. But if we look at all of these early church fathers, they all ascribe these Gospels to the right people. Whether we look at Polycarp, who was a disciple of John, Irenaeus was another one, mid-2nd century, Ignatius, who was the end of the 1st century, beginning of the 2nd century, they all have the Gospels to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the right places. And so there's never been a dispute by the early church fathers who wrote these Gospels. And while that is not direct in that Mark and Matthew didn't sign their Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John didn't sign them, but we can ascribe, Luke to write his Gospel and also the book of Acts. So that takes care of 5 of them right there. And we'll look at the Old Testament canon in another session. But for now, let's say that it's really indisputable among the early church fathers who the Gospels belonged to, or to whom they belonged. It is easy to recognize in the writings of these early church fathers who wrote what. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are really put to sleep in the sense of we don't have to argue about who wrote these. It's accepted by all major scholars. You'll always have naysayers who say, nobody knows who wrote the Gospel of Mark. Yeah, we do. Papias said it was Mark who wrote it, and Mark was Peter's secretary and translator, and wrote down the things that Peter told him about Jesus Christ. And while Mark may not have been one of the apostles, he certainly was one that traveled with the apostles later on and became Peter's secretary. If you remember in Acts chapter 8 or 9, where they go to a house that belonged to John's family, Mark's family. And we see him be a traveling companion with Barnabas and also with Paul in Acts chapter 13. And so Papias acknowledges that he was Peter's secretary or translator and wrote down these things. So we have Mark there. And of course, Luke tells us that he interviewed eyewitnesses, which will be one of the things that we'll look at when we look at textual criticism as to whether the Gospels are reliable, or the copies of the copies of the copies have in some way been corrupted through the centuries as the assertion is made about these things. So that's what we'll look at, and we'll deal with that. Okay, so hopefully this has been helpful. If you have questions, if I didn't answer some things, please feel free to leave comments or ask these questions. Till the next time. Well, I trust that this has given you some answers on how how the Gospels have been identified as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and that it wasn't something that took hundreds of years. It was, in fact, in place, I think, as soon as they were written, and we'll look at that in future blogs. I have to say that I think the whole New Testament was written before AD 70, and I'll give you some evidence for that, or at least why I believe that, which I would say is my evidence for that. And I want to just thank you for tuning in and watching us here.